Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the Extra Mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now, your host, Jackson Mummy.
Everybody, welcome to episode 243 of the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. This is your host, Jackson Mummy. I own Celebration Bar Review. Somebody sent me an email back the other day and said, "Who are you?" And I was tempted to say, "I'm the guy that can help you pass the bar." But there you go. Welcome to this week's episode. Last week, we started a three-part series titled Don't Get Comfortable. And we looked at 4 things that you should not be comfortable with when it comes to your bar exam. Today, we're going to go a little bit further and talk about what you should be uncomfortable with. And we're going to look at a couple of things that should make you very uncomfortable right now and that it's good to be uncomfortable about. And then we'll wrap up section 3 of this 3-part series next week with a final look at what you need to actually be comfortable with. So a lot of comfort coming along. I know that many of you are uncomfortable right now as you wait for your bar exam results from February 2019. We should start to see those results in about 2 weeks or so as we get into early April. And then the first big state that will release results will be Florida on April 22nd. We expect that to be followed a couple of weeks after that by New York, New Jersey, some large states. Texas would come along. And typically near the end of the bar exam season, we would have California, Georgia, and along the way, a lot of uniform bar exam jurisdiction states producing results throughout about a 2-month period. So we'll keep you informed as all of those results start to happen, and good luck to all of you waiting for your exam results. We also know that many of you on the podcast with us are starting up for the July 2019 exam. We're just a little more than 4 months away as this episode is going to be released on the release date. So we're a little more than 4 months away from your exam date, and this is the time to begin. If you've been thinking that you've got time, that's not true. You don't. This is probably the optimum time to begin your studies for that exam. And of course, we also know we've got people who are planning on taking the exam in 2020, and we're glad to have you with us as well, and it's not too early for you to begin either. Now, if this is your first time on the podcast, I want to just remind you that you can watch or listen to the episode. If you prefer to watch, you can go to celebrationbarreview.com/243. That's the episode number. Watch the entire episode. The show notes are right there. If you prefer to listen to the podcast, you can do that on Apple iTunes, on iHeartRadio, on Spotify, lots of places where podcasts are syndicated. And again, there are show notes there. And if you'd like to go back into our archives, all of our podcast episodes can be found on our website. There's a button at the top for podcasts. You can check those out. And then finally, I wanted to let you know that we've been putting our episodes on our blog posts on the site in the video form. So if you are looking for something in the last couple of months, you can check out the blog and you will find all of the episodes there. So try to make sure that you get this information one way or the other. In any event, we're really grateful that you're here. We're glad you found us and excited to have you with us. Now, before we jump into today's message, I do want to let you know that this episode is sponsored, as always, by our special free training. It's called Do Something Different, Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. This is training that we've offered to thousands of bar students over the years and had great success with. It's a look at the 4 steps that you have to follow in order to pass the bar exam. We use lots of case studies. There's some polls. There's some opportunity to let you see into how the process works and what you have to do in order to be successful. We really encourage you to attend this training. It's going to be offered Thursday night at 7 p.m. local time. And we're really excited about the ability to offer this at a time that's convenient for you. So when you go to sign up, you'll just simply sign up using the webpage, celebrationbarreview.com/webinar, or right here on the show notes page for the video or the audio. And when you've signed up, you'll be able to watch and attend the webinar, 7 p.m. your time zone, wherever you are. So we're excited about that. Hope you'll do that. If Thursday at 7 p.m. doesn't work for you, you will also see an on-demand version that you can watch on any day or time that meets your schedule. One way or the other, we want to make sure you get this information because we know how important it can be in order to be successful. So again, encourage you to join us. You can check out the training just by registering here on the webpage or on the video or audio site. So look forward to having you for Do Something Different, Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam. All right. Well, I'm excited to get to today's message. I want to talk a little bit about this idea of getting uncomfortable. And really, the genesis of this was I was reminded recently of a statement by one of the great self-improvement gurus of our age, Tony Robbins, who said that in order to succeed, you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it's such I think, a profound thought because truthfully, most of us don't like to be uncomfortable for good reasons. And so we stay safe. We take the easy route, even when the easy route doesn't work very well. But if we're really going to grow, if we're going to take on a big challenge, and certainly passing the bar exam is a big, big challenge, you have to get comfortable with the idea that you're going to be uncomfortable. And you're going to have to be uncomfortable for a while, not forever, but for a while. And so last week, as I said, we began the series by talking about 4 things that you should not be comfortable with when it comes to your bar studies. And I got a lot of comment, a lot of reaction to it. I think I poked the bear a little bit. I touched some nerves. But here's what I said briefly. I said, you shouldn't be comfortable with failure. You shouldn't be comfortable with being a victim. Ooh, that one really stung, I think. I said you shouldn't be comfortable with making excuses. And finally, that you shouldn't be comfortable following the crowd. Now, if you want to check out that episode in more depth, I'd love to have you do it. It's episode 242. You can check out the video by going to celebrationbarreview.com/242, or you can find it on our blog page, or you can check out the audio version as well. So, with that as a background, today we're going to jump into a second of the 3 stages. We're going to look at what it is you need to get uncomfortable with. In other words, if I've identified some things you shouldn't be comfortable about, well, what is it that I want you to be uncomfortable about? What are the good things to be uncomfortable about? And I'm going to look at 4 particular items. The first of the 4 items that I think you have to be uncomfortable with if you're going to improve and pass the bar is you have to be uncomfortable with your current life. Now, if you are blissfully in unicorns and rainbows, I doubt if you're listening or watching this podcast. But maybe you are, and maybe it's just like, oh, I'm so excited I get to take the bar exam. Okay, good. I'm glad. I love the bar exam. It's been my career for 30 years. So I get that part. But the truth is, if you are taking the bar exam, it is almost certainly because you're making a life change, a transition of some sort. Now, if that's a transition from being a law student to a lawyer, that's a pretty obvious one. But maybe it's a transition from having your own law practice in the Northeast and you're moving to someplace that's warmer. Or maybe there's been a change in your life circumstance, or maybe you're back into the workforce after being out for a number of years. In any event, there's something that's happened for most people that causes them to now be in a situation where they have to take the bar exam. If there was no bar exam, no one would offer to take it. So we recognize that it is an imposed requirement, but that doesn't mean that you have to be comfortable with it. And in fact, I would say that the best bar takers are the people who are uncomfortable with their current life. If you are satisfied with what you're doing, there's not much motivation to take the risk and make the effort to pass something like a bar exam. If your law practice is going just great and you're busy and everything's going well and you love where you live and you love your life and you love your clients and you just love everything, well, I doubt if you're the person that's going to be jumping up and down and saying, let me go take another bar. The reality is that when people take the bar exam, it's because something in their life is making them currently uncomfortable. It's the pearl in your oyster. Is that right? I think so. Anyway, the idea is that you have to be uncomfortable with something about your profession, I think, in order to want to move on. I don't know many people that would say the best years of my life were being a law student. It certainly wasn't for me. And so I wanted to move on from being a law student. I wanted to move to the next level. And I think for so many people, that's true as well. But we get comfortable. We get comfortable with that sense of, well, it's okay where I am. I often hear from lawyers who are thinking about relocating to Florida and then find out they have to take the bar exam. And they further find out that it's very expensive and it's very time consuming. And the character and fitness check is incredibly difficult in Florida. And they say, well, why would they do that? I mean, it's just protectionist trade activity, isn't it? And my answer is yes, of course it is. But it's something beyond that. I think it's a recognition on the part of the bar examiners that unless you're really dedicated to doing this, unless you're all in, well, it's easy to blow you out. We'll just charge you a lot of money. We'll give you a very difficult character and fitness background check to fill out. And if you're just playing at it, if you're generally okay with your life, you're not going to bother. And it works really well. I think there are literally thousands of people every year that go, yeah, not for me. I'm not going to do it. And that's just what the Florida bar or any other bar exam, I think, set of bar examiners would like for their particular jurisdiction. So I think you have to be uncomfortable with your current life in terms of your professional development if you're going to sit for the bar exam. You got to want something more. Now, along with this, I think a lot of people have to get uncomfortable with their current lifestyle. I talk to lots of people who have good jobs, but they're not doing what they want in the law. Maybe they went to law school, didn't pass a bar exam, maybe you didn't even take the bar exam at the time, and have their careers going, and they're doing well in those careers, but now they feel unsatisfied, unfulfilled, or it's a bucket list item. You've got to really be uncomfortable with the way your life is to make the sacrifices that come with studying for the exam. This won't come without a price. There's a financial price, there's an emotional price, there's an ego price, and there's certainly a time price that comes with it as well. And so if you are comfortable with your current lifestyle, it is very unlikely that you're going to put in the effort that you need. When I hear someone say to me, well, everything's going really well and I'm super busy, and I think maybe I'll put in a couple of weekends before the exam and maybe the week before the test, I can tell you right now they won't pass the exam. They're really not willing to get uncomfortable with their current lifestyle. And so I think you've got to ask yourself, am I comfortable with my current lifestyle? And if I am, can I get uncomfortable enough with it to take the risk of taking the bar exam? And then I think the third area of your current life that you need to be uncomfortable with is the opportunity that exists for you. If you're comfortable with the opportunities that exist doing what you're doing right now, you're not likely to take the bar exam and be successful. But if you want something else, if you want a better job or a bit better opportunity, if you want a bigger law practice, if you want to move into a circumstance in which you use your legal skills in a better way for you, you've got to be willing to get uncomfortable with your current opportunity so that you would take the chance to pass the bar exam. I think the point I'm really trying to make here is that in whatever context you think about your current life, whether it's your profession or your lifestyle or the opportunities that are presented to you, if you're generally okay with where they are right now, you're not really a good candidate to pass the bar. Well, you might have to take it, but it's not very likely that you're going to do well on it. I see this sometimes with bar students, 3Ls, who have just finished law school. They don't particularly want to practice law. In fact, some of them will say on the webinar to me, I really don't want to practice law, but my parents want me to, my family wants me to, whatever it might be, or I've got to get out of debt or whatever the circumstance is. But the truth is they're generally not very uncomfortable with where they are right now. I mean, life's pretty good. Mom's basement isn't bad. And in that circumstance, they simply don't have the desire to run through the walls you have to run through in order to pass the bar exam. I said in last week's episode that there was a time on the bar exam when everyone expected to pass, and most people did. Today, that script has been flipped. I would say most people do not expect to pass, at least on the first try. And as a result, it takes a lot more effort to be successful on the exam than it did 30 or 40 years ago. So if you're not uncomfortable, or at least in some way unhappy with your current status in life, your profession, your lifestyle, your opportunity, I think you need to get uncomfortable if you're going to be able to do what it takes to be a successful bar passer. All right, so that's the first thing I think you have to get uncomfortable with. The second thing I think you have to get uncomfortable with, particularly if you've repeated and failed the bar, is you need to get uncomfortable with your study plan. If you're a repeat bar taker and you are committed to doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to keep failing over and over again. And you might say, well, that's obvious. Why would anybody do that? Well, the reason is it's comfortable. It's just safe. It's easy to do the same thing. I know how the big box bar review works. I know what blanks I'm supposed to fill in. I know what mnemonics I'm supposed to learn. I know the idea of making flashcards. I just do those things. I follow the crowd. My study plan sucks, but it's the best one for me. Really? That seems like such an odd thing for people to say. But I hear it from students. I hear them say, my study plan was okay. Well, no, it wasn't. If you failed the bar exam, by definition, your study plan wasn't okay. I just need to say that up front. When someone comes to me and they say, well, I've taken the bar 2, 3, 4 times, and I say, well, where did you have difficulty? Oh, I didn't really have any difficulty. Everything worked pretty well. I just failed by 30, 40 points. Well, that's delusional. If you're failing the bar exam, something's wrong. The study plan you're using isn't working for you. And I'm not saying it's a bad plan. I'm just saying for you, it didn't work. And therefore, you have to do something different. You need to get uncomfortable with that study plan. I am constantly amazed by students that come to me knowing that we teach a different approach to study, a different approach to writing, a different approach to test taking. And they get into the course, they pay their money, and they say, so when are we going to learn how to IRAC? We're not. What do you mean? Well, because it didn't work. We don't use it. We use a different system. Well, yeah, but I'm really comfortable with IRAC. Yeah, you are. And did it work? No, it didn't work. And because it didn't work, you got to do something different. That's why we call our webinar, Do Something Different. You figured it out, right? And so the reality is that if you're so comfortable with your study plan that you just keep making the same mistakes over and over again, well, you're never going to get to the point where you can pass the bar. I think that what happens for a lot of people is that the safety and security, even of a bad system, beats the opportunity and the risk of trying something different. I talked about this a little bit last week, but ultimately, if you're comfortable with your study plan, I can tell you, if you have failed using that study plan, unless you modify it, you won't be successful. Now you might say, well, what about people that take your course and fail? Do you have them do the same thing again? And the answer is no. We try to modify it. We actually try to do things differently. We try to identify where in the study plan it didn't work for them and then modify that approach. So I actually try very hard to make sure that no one's ever comfortable with the study plan, because I want them reaching and trying to do more. And I think if in your own experience, you have found yourself getting back into the rut or into a habit or a routine, even when you know that that routine didn't work, it's really important to stop and take a good hard look at that. If you've been spending 10, 12, 14 hours reading your outlines and it hasn't worked, maybe you ought to consider photo reading. If you've been using IRAC writing and it hasn't worked, maybe you should consider a different writing style. If you've been using an approach to study that's built on the idea of memorization and recitation of elements, then you should consider a different approach to answering questions. You see, all of these things can happen and they can move scores dramatically. But as long as you stay in your comfort zone around your study plan, you are not going to be successful, at least statistically. You know, the bar examiners are very fond and very proud of the idea that consistent inputs into the bar exam result in consistent outputs. That's their statement. And what they mean by that is that if you study the same way, you should get about the same score every single time on the bar exam. And they actually take pride in the fact that people that fail the exam tend to stay in a fairly demonstrable range from their first score to their last score. In other words, they're usually in about a 5 to 7 point range on the bar exam. Why? Because they don't do anything differently to prepare, and so they get about the same result. That tells the test makers that their test is accurate and correct because it gives the same result for the same inputs. That's not something you want to have happen, but because it's a reality, you got to change the input if you want to change the output. So the second thing I think you have to be uncomfortable with if you're a repeat bar taker is your current study plan. Now, the third thing that I think you got to be uncomfortable with, regardless of whether you're a first-time taker or a repeat bar taker, is you should be uncomfortable with what you know. Oh, this one really irritates the really snotty, top-of-the-class law school students who are just graduating. You know the ones. They're not listening to this podcast, so I can feel very comfortable in saying this. But they're the arrogant SOBs that ran to the front of the room after every class and decided to, engage in witty banter and interesting hypos with the professor. I have to tell you, I really disliked those students as a teacher, and I really, really hated them when I was a student because I wasn't one of them, I guess. But these are the people who are so arrogant in their absolute belief that, of course, they're going to be clerking on the Supreme Court soon, that they don't need to know anything more. They know it all. They are brilliant. And, that summer clerkship they did for big, huge, and enormous, and then the work they did for Professor Genius has certainly made clear that they are going to be no problem on the bar exam. You might be surprised to find how many of them fail, but nonetheless, the reality is that there are people out there who believe that they know everything they need for the bar. These are also include some very successful attorneys who remember a bar exam from 40 and 50 years ago and are totally shocked when they find out what the bar exam is today. But they haven't yet discovered what I think a lot of people have come to find out, and that is you better be uncomfortable with what you know because you don't know enough. You see, what you've learned is not for the bar exam. I have not met anyone who studied and knows all of the bar subjects in detail. It's just simply not possible. And no matter how much attention you paid in law school, you didn't study the 19 or 20 or 25 subjects that are going to be on the bar. And if you've been in practice of law for 20 or 30 or 40 years, I can guarantee you aren't familiar with all of the subjects that are going to be on the bar exam. The bar exam is a generalist test. It's not a specialist test. It's not a test to see if you are the best torts lawyer in America. It's a test to see how well you can work across a wide variety of subjects on a lot of laws at a lot of different levels. And because of that, no one comes to the bar preparation knowing enough. The people that think that they know enough are honestly and often terribly surprised and terribly frustrated because suddenly they recognize that the body of material that they have to consume is simply too much. And so if you're comfortable with what you know, you're simply not going to be curious enough to find out what you need to know. And the bar exam and a good bar review has to be good at teaching you across that body of material. Now, do we have to make you expert in every subject? And the answer here unequivocally is no, we don't. And it's not our desire, and we don't want to do that. Really, all we want to do is get you competent enough to pass the bar. And what's competency? Well, it might be a 3-hour lecture and a couple of hours of reading and some practice questions. It might be much more extensive than that. It depends on the subject and how it's tested in your jurisdiction and what you need to do with it. And for some people, there will be subjects you need to spend a lot of time on. For other people, there will be subjects that they feel comfortable with. And if you're a foreign trained attorney or someone that's been out of law for many, many years, you're going to find that virtually every subject is new and unusual to you, and you don't know enough about it. And unless you're uncomfortable about that, you simply won't make the effort to learn what you need to know. Too often I see students who think that they know a subject only to find out when really presented with a difficult essay question or a difficult fact pattern, they really don't know the subject well at all. And so you have to get uncomfortable with this idea of what you know, first because it's not enough. But the second reason you have to be uncomfortable about what you know is because typically what you know is the wrong stuff. Oh, that's going to just irritate some of you beyond belief. See, some of you are great litigators. Maybe you're in criminal law, either as prosecutors or public defenders. Maybe you've been doing the practice of your area for years and years and years and years, and you fancy yourself to be an expert. And yes, you probably are. But here's the thing. The bar exam doesn't test that world. The bar exam tests a hypothetical, abstract, academic world of knowledge, and it may be nothing like what you do in practice. I see this all the time with practicing attorneys who say, well, you know, in my jurisdiction, we do X, Y, and Z. That's great, but you're not in your jurisdiction anymore. And they don't do X, Y, and Z. And the bar exam doesn't test X, Y, and Z. We actually test A, B, and C. And this drives people crazy. Because they've learned all these things. They've learned the practice of law in certain ways, but it's not what we do. We also see this, though, from law students who say, well, I learned in law school how to write a memo. Yeah, no, you didn't. Or I learned in law school how to write an essay. Yeah, no, you didn't. And so when we have to say to them, you're going to have to learn a different way for the bar exam, boy, for some people, that is really difficult to do. And they'd much rather do the same thing they did in law school, even when they know it's not a law school exam, than make the change they have to make for the bar examiners. They think they're writing, for example, to a kindly law professor who wants to give them a passing grade and get them out of the class. But the bar graders are somebody completely different. They're not academics. They're not people who are inclined to want to help you. It's a completely blind read, and you get about 5 minutes per essay in most jurisdictions. It's not really a big, in-depth reading, and yet people write as though they're trying to write a note for a law review. It just doesn't work. And so the point I want to make is that you have to be uncomfortable about what you know, because most likely what you know is not correct for the purposes of the bar. And I know that that just infuriates some people. And I know that it doesn't seem fair. And I know that some of you are thinking, well, but I am world renowned in my field. Good for you. I'm glad. It's the best thing in the world. But here's the problem. You may be world renowned in one field, but I got 19 other subjects that you don't know squat about. And until you get the idea that what you know doesn't matter for us, then you get lost. You know, this is one of the things that I find so ironic about the big box bar reviews. They will announce a great professor teaching a subject, and I appreciate the credentials of that professor. But the truth is, you don't have to be a genius in conflicts of law in order to answer a conflicts question on the bar exam. You don't have to go into the weeds in trust law and wills law or corporations law the way that some of these professors do in order to answer bar questions. You know, I took a tax course in law school. It's called Tax for Poets. was a great course. I didn't have to know everything about tax law. I just had to know enough to fill out my own tax report. You see, there's a certain level of commonality that will work, and the bar exam operates at that level of generality. And so if you think that you need to do the specific things in depth the way that you do in your practice area or your great area of emphasis in school, you're going to be surprised. And you got to get uncomfortable with that, I think, in order to make progress. Well, I'm probably not making any friends here, am I? All right, number 4 on our list of things to get uncomfortable with is that you have to get uncomfortable with how you demonstrate your competence on the bar exam. You've got to get uncomfortable with how you demonstrate competence. And what I mean by that is that many people have to get uncomfortable with how they learn to write in law school and how they learn to take multiple choice tests in school or in other places. And the reason I say that is that the bar exam simply doesn't reward the things that worked in law school, and it doesn't reward the approaches that you might take in other parts of your world or in your life. Let's look at writing first. Most people that come to the bar exam believe that they should use issue, rule, application, conclusion, IRAC style writing. When you ask why, they'll simply tell you, well, it's what I did in law school, or it's what the big box bar reviews told me to do, both of which are true, neither of which matter. On the bar exam, the examiners are not interested in your ability to issue spot. Why? Well, in the practice of law, issue spotting would be time-consuming and costly to your client. It would be a waste of time for the judge and the jury. It would certainly offend opposing counsel, and you'd probably get sanctioned for it if you did it to the extreme. Issue spotting doesn't get us anywhere. In the same way, memorizing the law and identifying and memorizing rules is not a particularly valuable commodity anymore. I've said many times that you can check with your intelligent assistant now, your artificial intelligent assistant, and find almost any law, any rule immediately right here on your wristband. And the result of that means that what skill is being evaluated and appreciated by the legal community, by your clients, by judges, juries, opposing counsel, is your ability to analyze problems and apply the law as you understand it. And that's the skill the examiners test on the exam, not your ability to recite the elements of negligence, for example. So the result of all of this is that people end up spending time with skills that don't really apply in the bar exam. And so if you've demonstrated competence by writing the way you wrote in law school on the bar exam, what you're going to discover is that it's not highly rewarded. The examiners aren't going to say, oh, we love that IRAC writing. Let's read more about the issues that didn't matter before we get to the things that really do matter. As a result, unless you're uncomfortable with that writing style, you're simply not going to be open to doing what you need to do. And I know that some of you are so totally brainwashed about this that you absolutely will not believe me until I tell you that the major bar review companies, which prepare well over 90% of the applicants in America, all teach IRAC writing. If IRAC writing were in and of itself the panacea, the solution, we should see a pass rate of about 85–90% across the country in the bar. We don't see that. What we see is a pass rate under 50%. And I would tell you that the correlation here and the causation has much more to do with the fact that people are still writing in a way that doesn't meet the needs and the requirements of the bar examiners. There's not a bar examiner that I've seen anywhere in the country that says, we want you to IRAC. I just haven't seen it. They don't say it. And moreover, when you look at the scores of people that write using different writing styles, you'll see that they are rewarded for taking the arguments apart, using the law as they understand them, and reaching a conclusion. And that's the writing style that we teach. So if you are comfortable with the way you demonstrate competence as an IRAC writer, you are in for a hard road. Now, I'm not saying that IRAC writers never pass the bar. What I am saying is that they end up doing a lot more work and write a lot more words, and a lot fewer of them pass than you might expect. In the same way, I think we've got a problem when it comes to answering multi-state questions or multiple choice questions. If the way you demonstrate your competence in a multiple choice question is by reading carefully, taking a lot of time, analyzing, nitpicking, eliminating wrong answers, narrowing down, memorizing rules and mnemonics and elements, and then taking a wild guess at the end, I can tell you, you're not likely to be successful. As the bar exam has gotten tougher and tougher, we've seen a drop in the mean scores nationally on the multi-state. Now, interestingly enough, our scores of our students have gone up during that same time period. And the reason is that we demonstrate competence for the multi-state very differently. We prepare our students for the exam differently, and we have them take the exam in a different way. Most of our students actually finish 100 questions on the multi-state in 2.5 hours, not the full 3 hours and then have to guess at the last 10 questions, which is typical and normal. The result of that has been a much greater performance for our students, but it requires a willingness to be uncomfortable with how you demonstrated competence in the past. And so if you felt like the way that you demonstrate competence on a multiple choice question is to outwork the exam, to outknow it, to outguess it and figure it out, well, unfortunately, I'll tell you that that just doesn't work very well. And the National Conference of Bar Examiners will tell you that the exam is designed in such a way that you really can't outforce it. You can't outwork it. You can't know it so well that you'll be able to answer the questions. That's really not what's going on. Because again, part of what they're testing is your judgment. It's your ability to analyze the problem and get to the right result for the best of 4 reasons. That's very different than saying, well, I'm analyzing all the elements of a rule. There just isn't much call for that in the practice of law today. And so it makes sense. Why would the examiners reward, either in the writing or the multiple choice questions, skills that aren't in use today, not the skills that people need? You know, when I was back in Georgetown at the Writing Center, we helped create it. It came as a result of legal professionals in the Northeast, big law firms who said, you've got great graduates, brilliant people, but they don't know how to write. Well, that was not something that Georgetown wanted to hear. And they said, well, what do you mean they don't know how to write? They're IRACing. And these legal partners and professionals came and said, yeah, but we don't IRAC. We never do that. So why not teach your students how to write in a way that makes sense for the world that they're actually going into? And that was really an eye-opening experience for me over 40 years ago, but it's still true today. You've got to provide material for the audience that demonstrates the skill that you're really being tested on. And I think a lot of bar takers simply don't do that. But again, if you're comfortable with the way you demonstrated competence in law school or in your profession, and it's not the same as what the bar exam is asking for, you're going to have a hard time being successful. Well, when you think about it, these 4 things to get uncomfortable with, being uncomfortable with your current life, with your current study plan, with what you know, and finally with how you demonstrate competence, all boil down to one thing. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You've got to understand that in the discomfort that comes around those things is the opportunity for growth. It's the opportunity to learn. It's the opportunity to express yourself in a way that's going to be more appealing and more successful on the bar. But if you're comfortable, if you're in your comfort zone and you're staying safe around any of these areas, it's been my experience that you won't be successful on the exam. And that's hard to hear, I know, because some of you are so heavily invested in your current life or your study plan or what you know and how much you know and how smart you are and how you demonstrate your competence that you're just unwilling to move off of dead center. And unfortunately, what happens for a lot of people is that they have to fail the exam a few times before they're finally nudged off of that spot, and they begin to look with a greater degree of clarity and open-mindedness about what else they should be doing. Now, I know that this series is really going to ruffle feathers. I love that, actually, because I think our industry needs some feather ruffling. And I hope that it's provoking you to think about what you're doing. And if you would say to yourself, well, you know, I'm really pretty comfortable with my current life, or I'm comfortable with my study plan, or I'm comfortable with how much I know, or I'm comfortable with the way I demonstrate that knowledge, ask yourself again, if I were uncomfortable with it, what would change and what would the potential outcome be of making those changes? Now, in our next episode next week, we're going to talk about what you do have to be comfortable with. There are 3 or 4 things that I think you have to be comfortable with after you've gone through this discomfort. So I promise I'm not going to leave you in a state of perpetual discomfort. That's not my goal here. But I hope that it's caused you to give a bit more thought to this process of being uncomfortable and getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Well, that's our episode for this week. Thanks for being with me. It's been great having you here and sharing these thoughts and ideas with you. I want to remind you before we sign off that our special free webinar, Do Something Different, Make the Next Bar Exam Your Last Bar Exam, will be provided and presented on Thursday night at 7 p.m. local time. Be sure you sign up. You must register for it, and you can do that at the website celebrationbarreview.com/webinar or right here on the show notes pages. And then we'll see you again next week about the same time and place along the Extra Mile as we continue our look at what it means to be uncomfortable about the bar exam. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
for listening to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at www.celebrationbarreview.com.